It all started one Sunday morning in New York City back in 1938 when Lee Walter Travis, a 25-year-old wealthy young publisher of his own newspaper company called The Globe Leader, was accompanied by his trusted personal assistant, Wing Lee, when they attended a Halloween party charity event in New Jersey to help Chinese victims after their city of Wuhan fell. So now at the Van Glider Estates, Lee Travis, dressed like a highway robber, will witness the benefit party suddenly being robbed by 4 violent gangsters disguised as aliens, who next murdered the security guard, then Lee Travis' friend Claudia Baker, after she tried to prevent one of the goons from stealing her sacred golden lighter before she whispered her last dying words to him in Latin, Qui Vidice de Tipi, which means the Avenger will come, as the goons made off with the charity proceeds in their vehicle. Nonetheless, Lee Travis and his assistant pursued after them in their own car in a high-speed chase down the road while gunshots rang out from one of the gangsters' Thompson submachine gun. Luckily, however, the limousine Lee Travis' paranoid grandfather left them was plated in bulletproof armor. So the goons, now realizing this, one of them decided to use a flamethrower in their attempt to end the pursuit of their pursuer, until Lee Travis shot back with Wing Lee's Glock 45 handgun, accidentally hitting the flamethrower's gas tank that took the goon out when Lee Travis was actually trying to shoot the assailant himself. Unsurprisingly, the goons lost control of their vehicle and veered off the road, crashing into a ditch. So Lee Travis gave chase on foot within someone's farmyard, eventually catching up with one of the gangsters who ran out of bullets and knocking him out, before next quickly running down the third criminal on a wooden bridge and knocking him over into the river below, when suddenly the goon Lee Travis prior knocked out regained consciousness and was on the verge of delivering a fatal gunshot to our heroes, when out of nowhere the gangster was shot and killed by the farm owner named Bill Dock. Furthermore, Lee Travis would search through the pockets of the goons and eventually find Mrs. Baker's sacred golden lighter, which ironically had the inscription of her last dying words that May was the vessel the curse was in, before unleashed on Lee Travis to utter the words Crimson Avenger, as he published the alias in his newspaper after not wanting to be connected to the events of that evening, which got the local authorities involved. Thereafter, Lee Travis became the vengeful crime fighter, using 2 mystical handguns to mow down criminals without hesitation, which made him feared by the underworld and hunted by the police, while he later joined a superhero group called the Lost Legionnaires, also known as the 7 Soldiers of Victory, as he donned a new yellow and red coal unitard, while a painful, constantly bleeding bullet hole marked his chest from the effect of the curse. Unsurprisingly, his faithful valet and unofficial 8th Soldier of Victory, Wing Lee, joined him in heroism, donning a costume of his own, which during this time, Wing Lee sacrificed his life trying to help the 7 Soldiers of Victory defeat the monstrous Nebula Man that after threw our heroes to the Time Bearer by the sheer force of his destruction. Succeeding this, after over 40 years, it would take the combined might of the Justice Society and the Justice League to recover the 7 Soldiers of Victory from various time traps. However, although Lee Travis aged less than a week during his ordeal, he was now a stranger in a time period he wasn't accustomed to. Following this, he was recruited into the All-Star Squadron. So as more time progressed, Lee Travis would retire from superheroism after being diagnosed with an incurable, inoperable disease that gave him less than 1 week to live. So realizing this, he decided to embrace his fate to end his legacy by being a superhero once again and save a child who fell out an open window of an apartment building, and then next hitchhike on the skids landing gear of a commuter shuttlecopter towards a tanker ship in distress off the coast of Detroit that, unbeknownst to him, was being hijacked by 3 pirates looking to make a fortune from the experimental chemicals stashed in the hold of the ship. However, the chemicals were unstable and explosively volatile. Fortunately, Lee Travis, under the disguise of a thick red fog of smoke he unleashed, battered and bruised the would-be robbers before saving the ship's captain and the crew. Unfortunately, however, during the chaos, an explosion from a grenade one of the pirates was holding caused the ship to be inflamed, risking a devastating explosion that could level the entire city into a smoking crater. So Lee Travis decided to sacrifice his own life by steering the ship out of Detroit's harbor and into the open waters, but not before he secured the safety of the passengers on board by putting them on a lifeboat. Unfortunately, the Midnight Manstalker, Crimson Avenger, Agent of Vengeance Lee Travis ended his relentless force for justice and curse by vanishing in an explosive blaze of blinding, deafening glory, However, the spirit of vengeance would live on, but this time, years later, in a lawyer from Detroit, Michigan named Jill Carlyle, when her client, a New Jersey man named Charles Durham, a reformed criminal who used to engage in a lot of illegal activities with his younger brother, he introduced to the streets and now was deep in the criminal underworld until the younger brother got upset. Charles decided to leave the streets alone, but ended up getting arrested the day before his wedding when he was framed and later wrongly convicted to be sentenced to death by electric chair for sexually assaulting and taking the life of a female classmate. Jill, now blinded by rage and grief after Charles was executed, brought 2 handguns at a pawn shop that, unbeknownst to her, belonged to the original Crimson Avenger. And when she shot and killed the man she thought was responsible, the triggers from the guns disappeared, as she now became an unwilling agent of powerful forces that crafted themselves to her soul, transforming her into the immortal Crimson Avenger as a blindfold appeared, permanently covering her eyes, allowing her to see only the color red and what she needs to see, along with a never-ending painful bleeding bullet hole appearing on her chest to symbolize her sins. Meanwhile, the permanent holsters around her waist held her now 2 indestructible 1911 Colt pistols that automatically shoots powerful bullets that could pierce through anything and never misses or runs out, to make her an unwilling, ruthless vigilante, while she also had the ability to automatically teleport after being enveloped and appearing in a crimson mist, during which she's unconscious, to be taken to her next objective, which is tracking and killing those who have taken innocent life, after she's temporarily tormented with experience the pain of each victim's death, while being infused with the memories and skills of the spirit she must avenge, until she kills those responsible for said death. However, her only hope of escaping this bleak future is finding out how Lee Travis freed himself from the curse, which is believed Wing Lee sacrificed his own life to do so. Furthermore, when the supervillain body-snatching Ultra Humanite used the unlimited power of the Genie Thunderbolt to form the world into his own image, Crimson Avenger Jill Carlyle found herself teaming with the New Justice Society of America to combat and try to free most of the world's superheroes that were being mind-controlled by a group of telepaths called the Mind Sweepers that formed them into an evil group called the Thunderfront. Nevertheless, in our heroes' base camp a few miles below the surface, the Thunderfront, along with their leader, the Ultra Humanite, and his army of guerrillas, will infiltrate and attack our heroes. Unsurprisingly, the JSA would defeat them after a grueling battle that saw casualties on both sides. However, it was shockingly announced the Crimson Avenger's primary mission was completed after she disclosed the Ultra Humanite was connected to the explosion that killed Lee Travis. So she abruptly left the team, to Sandman Sandy Hawkins' shocking disapproval. Moreover, her next target would be Ted Grant, famously known as the superhero Wildcat, which she would track him at an apartment complex where he was with Power Girl Kara Zor-El, taking down a handful of contact terrorists, planning some kind of attack on the United Nations. Interestingly enough, the Crimson Avenger will go on to save Wildcat's life before surprisingly turning the guns on him. However, Power Girl intervened by standing between Crimson Avenger and her target, only to be hit by a barrage of bullets that actually injured the Kryptonian, bringing her down to her knees, before the Crimson Avenger turned her attention back on Wildcat and shot him to death for being the one who framed Charles Durham, when suddenly, to everyone's surprise, Wildcat came back to life, being that he had the power of having 9 lives, which made him recover from fatal injuries without explanation. However, that didn't stop the Crimson Avenger from trying to take his life once again, since the guns constantly urged her to exact harsh justice, as well as on Power Girl every time she tried to intervene to prevent the Crimson Avenger from exacting justice. So Wildcat and Power Girl was left only to desperately try and make their escape up the flight of stairs, as Wildcat now had 5 lives left in total, which included losing 2 in separate incidents in the past. Unfortunately for Wildcat, he couldn't outrun his pending doom, as a red vapor of smoke signaled the approach of the Crimson Avenger, who mercilessly shot down Wildcat, taking another one of his lives, leaving him with only 4 left, as she also unleashed a hail of gunfire into Power Girl, who managed to catch one of the bullets and revert it back at her, which actually injured the Crimson Avenger. When suddenly Wildcat revealed the reason why he framed Charles Durham was because Charles was going to get away with murder for lack of evidence, after his own brother was the one who committed the atrocious crime to that woman, which was Charles's fiance. So in a fit of rage, Charles murdered his little brother, his brother's girlfriend, and his brother's 8-year-old son, which was his nephew. So Wildcat framed him for the murder of his own fiance. That later got him executed by electric chair. Subsequently, that put the Crimson Avenger in a mental dilemma of not knowing if she was avenging wrongdoings or avenging all doings. So she tried to end her torment by attempting to end her own existence. However, that move only teleported her to her next objective, which was now avenging the death of a woman named Jill Kyle, who was stabbed to death 17 times by her own husband after she tried to leave him. So the Crimson Avenger confronted him in Midway City within a pool hall, when shockingly, the supernatural being of near unlimited might, whose mission is to unleash the vengeance of God upon evil, the Spectra, quickly brought the Crimson Avenger down after the guns acted erratically towards him. As he interestingly revealed, the source of the Crimson Avenger's power is more corrupted magic than supernatural, which he came to end in the world. Succeeding this, the Crimson Avenger would survive and be seen coming for the Green Arrow, Oliver Queen, who was with his little sister, the Red Arrow, Amiko Queen. And next, Pat Duggan, also known as the superhero S.T.R.I.P.E, that was out eating with his stepdaughter, Stargirl Courtney Whitmore, after the Clock King was exhaustingly determined in unlocking the secret of time travel. So the Crimson Avenger, who also collected the remaining members of the 7 Soldiers of Victory to not only stop the Clock King, but to also aid her in saving the life of Lee Travis, whose body was actually never found, discovered the Clock King was after the ship that Lee Travis was on, because it had a time machine that would allow him to harness the chrono energy, which actually made the ship implode instead of explode, causing it to get thrown into time and now reappearing somewhere off the South Carolina coast. Unfortunately, when the Crimson Avenger tried to grab and save Lee Travis, the self-contradictory of the curse being in 2 places at once repelled her with the explosion. So Lee Travis cryptically disclosed there wasn't no way in saving him, but only Wing Lee. So our heroes went on to destroy the time machine, which imploded, leaving Lee Travis' lifeless body behind, as he was finally free from being stuck in limbo, while the Clock King was nowhere to be found. Unfortunately for Jill Carlyle, her curse remained as DC Comics' Crimson Avenger.